So I will get started with a few things which I wanted to share. Some of you perhaps are aware of this, but I wanted to put it out there so we understand why are we continuing to talk about women in industry or women in leadership. Because while we do have some of the inspiring role models, right from Ruchi Sangvi, who is with the first female engineer at Facebook, and now she went on to really lead the Dropbox. And then you have our Agniputri right here, that is Tessie Thomas. So you can start looking around. You have a Padma Shri warrior, you have Vanita, leading IBM. You can go on, picking up female leaders or women leaders. The idea is not just talking about women leaders and say they are different from male leaders. The idea is, can we inspire and bring in more women into the workforce? That is the only intention, and not to really look at it as women leaders are different from men. We're not talking about stereotypes here. We're not talking about those issues, because that is not the intent of this session. The intent of this session is to talk about how do we really inspire more women who are out there. We all know there are many women out there. Okay, they're all part of our lives, but are they willing to, or why are they not entering the workforce? A. And once they enter, what happens? Why do they drop out? Can we create that ecosystem within the organizations as well as in the societies or communities we're all part of, so that we encourage and inspire women to really continue to play along with us? That is the whole purpose and objective of this discussion. And I have a few statistics which I thought I will share with you. World Economic Forum ranked India when it talked about this is the 2012, that's the latest one, on the global gender gap. And do you know where India is? It's 105 out of 135 countries. So that's abominably low. While we talk about the large workforce and also the pipeline we do have when we talk about women in particular, we find it's only 105 out of 135 countries which are looked at. And similarly, International Labour Organization, ILO, it ranks India when we look at where is it from a participation rate of women in the workforce. We are ranked 120 out of 131. So you can see that this is where the gap is. So our intent here is, why aren't women inspired to really join the workforce? A. And once they join, why do they drop out? While we do have women role models, how do we keep them inspired? And it's as much a male question as it's a women question, I would say. Because many of you who are part of the organizations really want to harness this talent, would like to really get the customer quotient. Today we're talking about how it makes sense for us to create the D&I initiatives so that you reach out to a larger segment of customers. So it's from a business paradigm as well. It makes a lot of sense for you to have other diverse perspectives, women being one of those diversity quotients. So we're very much aware of it. So we're not trying to, you are not going to expect any of us trying to look at it, and some of us, and you will hear from Pamela, Anita, and Ritu as well, how they have managed to straddle some of these challenges, but at the same time, really focused on what they had at hand and risen above certain roadblocks, I would say. Not really looked at them as roadblocks, but looked at it as problem solving, and they have come onto their own. And today we're all very proud of each one of them in the technology frame and the space they have been part of, and how they have managed to rise above, as I say. A couple of other things. There is two groups I want to specifically make a mention. Catalyst Group, I'm sure all of you have heard of. They do a lot of research, specifically when you're looking at gender or D&I inclusion and initiatives and so on. So a lot of studies year on year in terms of what are these gaps and what are the issues. One of the things which came out and which shocked the Western world, not just India, is the pay range and the gap when it comes to gender. So I'm not going to speak much. Some of you are familiar. I can see Guru nodding. So I know you have been aware of these, and I'm sure you're working on some of these key initiatives from your organization end so that you can address the issues. And the other one which came out for CEOs in particular is McKinsey Global Report. And they talked about certain initiatives which would really harness the equality among diverse groups. So women being one of those groups. So what are the 4 things they talked about? They talked about how do we stay committed or become committed. Talking about it is different from top-down leadership. Are they really looking at bringing in diverse perspectives? So how do you harness talent, acquire talent, develop talent, as well as engage talent? All those would be the initiatives where you are committed. 2 is how do you broaden your action? eBay has some wonderful examples of how they broadened their action to encourage more and more women to stay in the workforce as well as grow into leadership positions. And similarly, the other one they talked about is holding challenging conversations. And this is one such initiative now we have taken through IESA Vision Summit, where we're going to have a challenging conversation, not challenging anybody, but challenging ourselves in terms of what have we done in order to get here and what do we need as organizations can come together to harness this talent and to groom them and nurture them and help them stay inspired. So that's the whole impetus of what we have out here. And I would request Pamela to get started. She's moved out of the closet is what she just said. So we want to hear from Pamela. What is it that she has found and experienced in the 30 years she's been part of the industry and now leading the Cloud Computing and Innovation Council of India. Over to you, Pamela.
Thank you. And as she said, yeah, I have taken this stand to come out of the closet for the last 30 years. Whenever I would be called in a forum addressing women's issues, I would either take a technology position and give a technical talk, or maybe a management position talking about things like management versus technical careers and stuff like that. In the recent year, I've been addressing the women's issues and it's been quite a journey for me, and I'll share that with you. So the transformational moments, as she put the question and I was thinking about it. And I said, where should I start? There have been so many. Maybe I should choose the 3 that are probably more relevant in the context here. And the first one really is when I had my first child. I had completed my maternity period, that intense period of having this baby, taking care, getting life going topsy-turvy, getting back on track. And I had started working again in a part-time model initially. I used to go for 3 days to work and stay a couple of days at home. And this was a very difficult period for me. My identity was very different from what I had my own view of myself, right? My identity was being very different. And I was struggling with certain things. I'd always been this top performer, 90 percentile, and when the appraisal for that year where I had been on maternity leave for more than 6 months, I for the first time ever I got a median rating. And I cried. Okay, it was difficult for me to take that, right? So I was going through that, and I was listening to this program on National Public Radio. I was in the US. I used to work in Bell Labs at that time, and they were interviewing these 2 black women from Alabama who had become very eminent. One was in industry and the other one was a professor in some top university. And they had risen from circumstances much, much worse than what I had lived through. Right? They had risen out of slavery. Their parents being in slavery, done their PhDs in a very discriminating and taken these positions. And the message that came out of that was that what kept them going was they looked at themselves as a part of a continuum, a part of an evolution of women in society. They looked at the lives of their grandmothers and mothers and felt so blessed to be in this time where they had opportunities. So what the challenges they faced around them was something they took in their stride, right? And that was such a fundamental message. It really gave me that inspiration and courage to get back and lead, and that became the guiding paradigm for me as I moved in the workforce. Then came another moment. I had been in Bell Labs and in C-Dot, and then I did a startup. I moved out to C-Dot. I had accomplished some good accomplishments behind me. And I went out interviewing in Bangalore. This was 1996-97. Okay, the boom of the IT industry had just started happening. A lot of MNCs, a lot of job opportunities. I must have interviewed 10, 12 places. Ultimately, I had 7, 8 job offers in my hand. But as I was going through these interviews, I realized, so here was this one interview where I go in there and somehow the person who was interviewing, he done his background check. Besides I don't know how much time he spent on my technical background, but he had somehow learned that I had a husband who was who was a professor. And as he's the VP of R&D technology, right? He has the technologies, and that's where I come in. And he's talking to me about fitting into this university relations position. And I'm like, what? This is why he's called me here? And I was really aghast. And I had the courage that I had 2 job offers in my pocket already. And I went and confronted him and said, what is your org structure? Give me the background of the people who report. Tell me your org structure. Then he explained to me his org structure and the people who reported and what their background and what they did. And I told him, you know what? Where I fit in is here, in this position that this guy has. If you have this job, let's talk. Otherwise, we are wasting our time. Okay?
Fabulous.
But the amazing thing is, and I have tremendous respect for this gentleman, he turned the conversation around. He started talking to me about my contributions, talking to me about technology, talking to me about my insights, and then they made me a fabulous offer. I didn't take that job because I was still on the startup biz and I wanted to do another startup. Obviously, they had a better pay package as well than a big multinational. But it gave me that I have to go position myself. The way I view myself, the way what I think, the world does not see me. There is some different glasses that we view ourselves. The world I am experiencing, the world they are experiencing. My aspirations, my role model is different. I always role model the CEO of the company, and I think I should be there, right? But the others that don't see me are naturally in that position, right? So that told me that I have to go position. I have to go ask where I need to, and if something is where I think is not right, I have to voice it.
Pamela, let me interrupt you and hold your thought on that. She made some very beautiful points in terms of her own journey and shared with us how she learned that things are very different, how people view you is different, being part of the diversity portfolio. And she also learned early on that she needs to position herself. And let me bounce this off you. I'm sure every one of you feel the same. So it's nothing to do with being a woman or a male. Every one of you feel the need to position yourself in order to really grab the right opportunity. Does that resonate with all of you? Yeah. Right? So it really is not the dimension of, maybe women feel it much more intensely given the kind of stark need or the gap as we talked about from a gender gap. But otherwise, that is something which clearly is the need for anybody who is pitching and positioning or getting into a workforce or moving up the ladder. With that, I would actually invite Anita now, and hold your thoughts, and we will come back to you, Pamela. I will invite Anita on that piece, as she said, role model. Anita, how do you feel when people take you as a role model today, and what did it take you to attain that kind of a journey up the ladder to achieve a position where you're taken as a role model? Over to you, Anita.
Thanks, Kiran. It's a hard act to follow when you model yourself with the CEO. I've never looked at it as I have to be the CEO, but I always kind of, going back to the start of the conversation where you said as a woman and how coming into this workforce, I went to science because science was exciting for me. Through my career, when I say career, I mean early education, that was something that got me excited. And anecdotally, which I pointed out to some of you, when I joined my engineering class, I think the women population was at 60 and 40 was the other one. This is electronics and telecommunication in a Bangalore college, right? And it was a proud moment for me to see that was the situation there, right? Now, to think back to now the condition today, I really see electronics not being the top subject for women to get into, right? Because of the software boom, I think from engineering perspective, they think that's an easier one. Now that apart, from this forum that we are talking about and trying to think how do we get more women in this industry, and I'm going to address this part of it more than the others, we have to play a role as women leaders and as men also in this group to make sure that it is exciting not just for women but for the younger population to think semiconductors and electronics is equally exciting. Back to your question about as a role model and how did I come through this. I've never thought of myself as a woman that needs to do something different because I'm a woman, right? Because I think part of it is my ecosystem around me as I grew up. I was fortunate there. But the one thing that resonates with me always is even women or men coming from very difficult circumstances and background, if they have conviction of their thought, they're confident, they can make it happen no matter where, right? I think that's my view. I've never thought of myself as being deprived or needing a handicap or some kind of a special status to make myself be at the next level. So the first thing that I've always believed in and I continue to believe is to be the best you can be, right? Look up for role models who are around you, and there's several of them. They don't have to be leaders above you. It can be your peers, it can be your juniors, it can be a brand new college hire that you came into your team. I really look for such role models. There is a quality about everybody that is amazing that we must learn to appreciate, acknowledge, and learn from it. That's been my mantra always, and I'll continue to do that. That's my goal, right? As far as how have I tried to grow in my own career, right? I think it's important to be very informed about what's going around in the business, right? No matter which team you belong to, being aware of what's the surrounding groups that either there's a dependency to or because it's a part of the ecosystem is something that women tend not to do as well. That is something I've heard about and I've personally understood it because if there's 5 things to take care of, you tend to focus on the caregiving part of it, and I'm referring this to all the women in the group, and I hope all men who also take equal part in their families, right? There is always this part of it that, oh, the kids go to school, that the kids get dinner, those things all have to be a part of our parcel. But how do you manage your time around this smartly? Building a support structure around yourself. People ask me, let me give you this anecdotal stuff. When I came and joined IBM 8 years ago and I was going through some of the roundtables, some of the women actually asked me, and men too asked me, if I was married and if I had kids. They assume I'm only, successful because I don't have those family, issues. But I think that's the piece that you are able to work through multiple scenarios, keeping a focus on the end goal on a daily basis, sometimes on an hourly basis, right? That's something that we have to keep track of. Women, I think, have an advantage of multitasking. I don't think there's any debate on that. Parallel processing is equal to multitasking is an advantage. Women take that bar of excellence very high. That we need to leverage in day-to-day work, right?
Thank you, Anita.
Yeah.
So what Anita was sharing with us is, I was just summarizing in my mind, 3 C's. She talked about being confident, she talked about being capable, and she talked about being committed. And if you are one of those, with all these capabilities, you will succeed. And that's a success mantra she has shared with us in terms of her own journey. And while she humbly admits that she never looked at herself as a role model, I'm sure there are a lot of young women who would die to get into the kind of roles that Pamela has envisaged and journeyed, and what Anita has been able to harness. Because there are a lot of young women, as I have understood and observed, and many of you would, that they're aspiring, but they are also very skeptical at times because of the ecosystems, as Pamela mentioned, very difficult circumstances or challenges. They do not know how, and they do need role models, and research has proven that having role models, especially in the diversity portfolio, helps people to stay inspired. And that's one of the reasons for many of the male counterparts out here, as you're building your policies and frameworks and the ecosystem within the organizations, creating role models for other women to feel encouraged, or any diversity portfolio you hold, will help really bring the ecosystem or speed up the pace with which you develop women leaders. So with that, Ritu, you now have a different hat, and recently you got acquired, Imensis Semiconductors got acquired by MediaTek. Do you want to share with us how was that exciting, fun-filled, yet difficult journey from moving from being an engineer into the hat of a founder and a CEO of a semiconductor company, and now with the exit strategy you have brought in?
Yeah, thanks, Kiran. So I think, so I come from a corporate background, and I mean, before Mensa, I was in TI for many years, and that's where my initial part of my career really shaped up. I think one of the things, obviously going on to what Pamela and Anita have also said, is that I've never really felt myself, like a different species. I mean, men and women are that way very equal. I mean, there are like, there are all men and women around everywhere in society. So it's not that I ever felt kind of, standing out. And I have been fortunate, I must say, that no one has ever made me feel this way, in the background that I have grown up in, as well as where I have worked. But, there are challenges, definitely, that as a woman I have gone through, and any woman, would have gone through, and for that matter, even men, who are equal caregivers in today's society. And I would say they go through more challenges because it is not very stereotypical for men to take on those roles. And they are even questioned even more. So keeping that aside, but if you look at it, for example, when the way I really look at men and women in society, and especially in this semiconductor space, if you look at through schooling and through high school and through colleges, I mean, you do see women doing very well. I mean, they're constantly topping charts, they're constantly doing well. So you have a very, you have a workforce, ready workforce, that is hugely talented. So it just makes business sense to make use of this workforce. If you're not making use of it, I mean, we're stupid. I mean, that is all I really look at it. So when I stepped out of my role in TI, where I was leading, worldwide development teams, and, I had a bigger picture in my head. And when I took on this entrepreneurship journey, I didn't really look at it in the fact that I was a woman and I was taking it on. And even when I talk to any customers, and many of my previous customers are sitting here, fortunately, no one really asked me that, are you able to run the business? I mean, it was, my track record spoke for itself. What I had accomplished and the confidence that I had gained from those accomplishments actually spoke for itself. And I think that is very important in women, to really build on that confidence and have that conviction in yourself, because that is all that makes a difference. Whether you really trust what you can do, whether you really believe in it, then all other challenges will be taken care of. It's just something that you personally believe in and really want to accomplish. You have a dream, how do you get to that dream? And really just focus on that. That's what I believe.
Thank you, Ritu. So she has very clearly gave us the message of self-belief. Again, this is gender neutral, right? A self-belief, the conviction somebody has in oneself, and how do you harness that? Because once you have self-belief and confidence within yourself and trust, you will be able to achieve several milestones in a career journey. And she was ready to take on the founder and CEO role of starting a company and now taking it to the next stage of being acquired, and she is going through those due diligence and other processes right now. So with that, Pamela has a few slides to bring in, specifically looking at the large talent pool, because Ritu also raised this question. We have a large workforce, or women who can get into workforce, but unfortunately we do not see as many entering the workforce. And once they enter, we do not see them really moving along the career journey for the 20 or 30 years. They drop out at different life cycle stages, as we would say. So given that, we really want to inspire the Gen Next. This is for all of us, and this is for all the companies and the organizations and the ecosystem. It is something we really need to harness. So over to Pamela to share with us the slides and walk us through.
Yeah, so this is just a context setting slide of the journey of women in the professional world. So as you see, the first generation was women who, due to circumstances, entered the workforce. and in their journey, the emphasis was on providing the basics, the maternity leave, the creche, and other basic facilities. And survival was their game. They wanted to survive in the work, continue to earn, and continue to be financially viable. Then we came to the next generation, which you probably see here, aspirational women, who entered the workforce because they wanted to prove themselves, they aspired, they wanted a bigger horizon, a bigger canvas to play on. And really, the challenge is, then we talked about, the glass ceiling and then the glass cliff, and all those concepts have evolved out of these aspirational women, and they are less than 10%. They will be less than 10%. Even aspirational men are less than 10%, right? And the focus there has been through the diversity initiatives and all that on learning the rules of the game. So you are living in a man's world, you accept that, you want to be successful by the rules of the game that have been defined by the legacy, and that's what we have done. When my daughter entered the workforce and she started experiencing the difference and she started questioning me about it, I started giving her these sweet messages and tactics and strategies on how to deal with this. And she looked at me aghast. Really, Mummy? I had brought her up to believe that it was an equal world. And suddenly I was giving her these nuggets of wisdom, and that made, it almost broke down the conversation, our communication. And it made me sit back and think that is there a new normal that we need to aspire for? Is there an androgynous workplace that really makes sense? And the key thing, do we need to change the rules of the game? And then the key thing that comes to me is there a business case for this? Unless there is a business case, this is not going to happen just because the women were not the majority, want to become the majority, right? There has to be a business case. And when I look at the world that we are, the ESDM world, what is happening? IoT is happening. What is IoT? IoT is about taking this technology, this hardware, software technology, beyond just communications and entering every sphere, every industry. What does it mean? It means the Y2K opportunity for India, for the ESDM workforce. It means an explosion of need of hardware and software engineers. Are we going to be wise and use those 10th and 12th standard toppers who are all women and then bring them into this workforce and grab this opportunity? That's what we need to think about. What are the skills that we need? Okay, we need mass customization. Okay, there is expansion. I've already talked about this. So let's move on to the next slide. Now look at this analysis about security in the ESDM world. There's a complex analysis that goes on that requires multidisciplinary thinking. It requires collaboration amongst different disciplines and different organizations, different industries to come together to solve these problems. Do women bring some specific strengths, natural strengths that we have grown up with our legacy? We see our grandmothers, mothers, our aunts coming together every day in the kitchen to put that food on the table without worrying who gets the credit, right? We are naturally collaborative. We are naturally multidisciplinary. We naturally think about the big goal. We naturally know how to make the right compromises to achieve the big goal. Is the business going to take advantage of that? We bring a diverse perspective to every discussion. Is the business going to take advantage or going to create the glass ceilings and the glass cliffs and force us to adapt to the way they know how to think? Okay, that's the question that I leave this forum with.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pamela. With that, I really want to open this up for the elite audience out here in terms of what you bring, and your insights are going to be very, very important for us because this is a dialogue. And having said that, there is a quote which I read which is very, very endearing, and I think it makes sense to all of us. This is how the quote goes: live without pretending. Because we started off the session with Mr. Pujari talking earlier on, talking about ethical and entrepreneurship and so on. So live without pretending, love without depending, listen without, what do you think it is? Defending, and speak without offending. With that, over to the audience to speak without offending. At the same time, do listen, and we are going to listen without any defensive way of looking at things. Over to the audience, please. Be Chris, introduce yourself and tell us what you want to share.
I'm Sucharita Ishwar, and I work with women entrepreneurs, helping them to start up and to scale up, and I'm setting up a technology platform for that. You started the session with some very interesting data, and coming from the world of entrepreneurship, I just wanted to place some more data and follow that up with a question to the panelists. The data on women enterprises in India shows that they are a little over 10% of all the business enterprises in the country. That's number one. And number two is that 95% of these enterprises belong in the micro and the small scale sector. So that really points to the fact that although we are almost 50% of the population, we are really, really minuscule when it comes to the world of business, particularly entrepreneurship. So my question to the panelists is, like, you know, I heard some of you saying that you need to be equipped, you need to be confident, and you need to just do your best. So, given that, why do you think that women are not becoming entrepreneurs and remaining down there in the micro sector?
So I'll take this question. I think I will talk especially about the semiconductor industry. And if you look at it, really there are less entrepreneurs altogether in the semiconductor industry, and over there obviously women being a smaller percentage of the workforce, it's lesser. But if you really I think and I have thought about this many times, one of the things that in the semiconductor industry especially, it is, and I'm not putting down software, but really the barrier of entry is higher. You need to have the depth of knowledge and understanding of this industry and what value you can bring to the table, and that requires years of experience and understanding of technology and the industry. With more and more women falling out earlier on and not staying till they kind of gain that experience, it's not easy to start something after just working 2 years in the industry and say that tomorrow I'm going to form my own company in the semiconductor space especially. And I think that is one of the biggest reasons why you see so many so less women entrepreneurs, especially in this segment.
And also to add to that, Pamela has already shared with us what's the opportunity or the big way where we can tap into not just male but also women out there who may not want to really get into the workforce in terms of the 9 to 5 or more, and they can be at home, because IoT should open up those opportunities where you can start tapping into what we call as the untapped economic engine called women.
Can you just answer to that?
Sorry?
Can you just value add to that question?
Oh, sure.
I think,
Introduce yourself.
yeah, my name is Hema. I run a manufacturing outlet. We make battery operated cycles and scooters out of Coimbatore. I'm basically a software engineer. Came into manufacturing consciously, so the question that she asked is what I was asking when I started my enterprise. And it was very daunting to see that many women want to come, but they don't want to be, even seem to be, taking more extra. In the village where they come from, they don't want to be seen as taking an extra mile to go to work or something like that. So most of the men spend only 9 to 6. So what we did was, I wanted to have a factory, particularly electric cycles, completely operated by women. So when we put that initiative, the first thing is, in 2008, a lot of textile mills were closed. So we took a lot of people from textile mills, trained them into automotive. And today, one line is managed by women. So I think that it is just that it's not that they don't want to come, it's a societal pressure. If you are able to give an ambience by which they're able to contribute, voice out, being in the industry, particularly in manufacturing for the last 8 years, I have not been able to get one women manager in my company. It's completely I would say, allow me to use the word male dominated. It is like that. But I think that another about 5 years, I could completely change it. Because that is the will that we have to make it, and we have to prove it to ourselves that by then job creation happens, women are more empowered, they have economic livelihood enhanced. So a lot of those things, I think, it's just that we have to take a will and we have to lead it. That's from my experience.
Thank you, Hema. That's a wonderful example you shared. Thank you so much for sharing it. And it also goes back to, as I quoted McKinsey report, it talks about where are the women, talent. 2 is they also talk about what are the skills we need to develop, and you're addressing that. And once you're able to bring them into the workforce, you can also tap and bring them into the managerial and the other levels as we're talking about. I have time for one last insight or question.
Should be
to
2
wrap.
questions from the men at least.
I want men, that's exactly where I'm looking at. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, my name is Chiranjeev. I am a researcher in high performance computing, and Pamela is always an inspiration. I have seen him leading very closely.
See, unconscious bias, you're saying him.
Yeah,
It's her.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you for pointing it out. So, following Pamela's one comment, right? So, you gave an example that you went for an interview and then you basically told the interviewer that you don't fit in that position but that position. Let's say, at this stage, if somebody comes to you, irrespective of a male or a female candidate, comes to you and say, you are interviewing him or her, capital HER, okay? And you ask him, and if that candidate tells you, no, Pamela, I don't fit here, I fit here, how do you react? What's your response?
Great question. Thank you for that.
Yeah, so the same way, as I said, I would stop back in my thinking and rethink my perception if I am trying to fit the person in a position they don't aspire for. Absolutely, and it happens all the time. But but the point is that yes, you need to renegotiate and reposition yourself, and that's a skill, especially as in the women thing. Now the question I deal with today is entrepreneurship. So many people come and tell me, Pamela, you need to start your own company, we'll join you, we'll help you, we'll support you. But there is that I had this comfort zone of having been in corporate and having that support system, So I've done startups, but somebody else's startup, right? So these are things that we have to deal with, and renegotiating and repositioning is a very important skill, not only as women, but I think even as men aspiring to be leaders, it's extremely important, and it doesn't come easy.
Thank you. I think we have one more question coming in. This is the last one.
Yeah. So I'm Niranjan and I work with IBM. So my question is mainly, you will notice women leave this whole corporate organization at a certain moment, and once they leave, re-entering the organization corporate sector is a challenge. I have a friend for the last 20 years we know each other, and I can say she is a role model. She did it thrice. I mean, she challenges us with parents and then husband and other stuff. Right? And every time she re-entered, and then let's be fair, everybody relatively 19-20 years experience, and then she was out, let's say, less years. So 2 things. Are we doing anything at the corporate policy level where they don't leave the organization maybe a year or 2? I know certain companies, even IBM has leave of absence and all. And when they come back and return, let's assist them appropriately, not just, hey, you were out. Sometimes when people question, hey, you are serious with the job or not, you are coming and going, right? Maybe tomorrow again you will leave. So how to change this perception?
So Niranjan, just to sum up, what you said, you also talked about a solution within the problem statement. You talked about what kind of policies do we shape in organizations to allow for women to re-enter workforce, because at different life cycle moments, women are going to drop out. That's not something which would not change at this moment of time. So we need to shape our policies in terms of how do we allow women to re-enter, and when they re-enter, what is it that we're going to do in order to help them quickly move back into the mainstream. I think there are organizations which are already working in that space. IBM is one such example, Intel, Microsoft, AMD. All of us have these very clear policies, because once you talk about a multinational, you do have policies where you can allow them to come back without any discrimination. But then the training and the skill set which is relevant at that point of time, and without any prejudice, you need to. And that's about the buddy system, which you have to develop in terms of the ecosystem within the company. So having said that, thank you for the thoughts. And we need to really, I have this red thing showing at me, time's up. And I know there are other sessions waiting. So we can continue some of the conversations and dialogue, once we break. Thank you so much for the engaging audience. And thank you, panelists.
You will stay where you are, please. Because you've really earned your laurels. I must say it was a very fascinating discussion. I'm a total outsider, as you all know. I come from the media side. Used to report for NDTV, and before that the Indian Express. Very, very similar in the newsrooms what we face. So I have kind of been this external observer, and I myself have taken career gaps, after motherhood and stuff like that. But for the gentleman who was asking that, in my case, every time I've taken a break, it has benefited me. I've come back to a totally different organization and a new stream altogether, from radio to television to whatever. So I think there are very shades of perspectives, but the questions that were raised, now they are so profound. What Pamela was saying about, do we therefore aspire to a new normal? And an androgynous work sphere. These are questions that I'm sure reverberate not just in the Indian space, but as we all know, in places across the world. And thank you for bringing up these questions, and also to Hema, for example, for sharing her experience in Sucharita. Thank you for being such a meaningful panel. It's really been worth the time. I'm going to request Kiranmai to therefore say it with even more gratitude to all our panelists for coming here and sharing their experiences, and to hand them over tokens of gratitude from the organizers. Thank you. Let's really hear it for the panels and for yourself. Well, from one great session, we move to the next one for a speech, that is. But meanwhile, may I request Venki to felicitate Kiranmai, because we did speak about equal representation, even in memento giving, I think. I can see that very evidently. All the men at IESA. Let's